Good morning. I was just in the shower and it arose in heart's eye that one of the reasons why I want to create some kind of coaching thing or be a coach of sorts of people stuck in the mental health system is because what came to me was currently I work in peer support and it's about listening and allowing a person to discover things for themselves. And this is really valuable. But I feel like since all of us who have been so indoctrinated into the system for so long, what we're going to discover as solutions and things we want to work on and goals are largely limited to the way we've been programmed to think about ourselves. So there aren't outroads in that. There aren't people thinking that they can really move beyond all of that. So I feel like I want to point that out and point some ways out that are possible. Doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. But I feel like we're so deeply conditioned to stay within that framework that we're going to get stuck there. We are stuck there, and there are other ways and solutions. So I do want to be able to point out solutions, and that's not really the role of a peer support worker. So I do want a different role. I don't want to listen to people's sad stories and not be able to say, hey, I don't take any of that stuff anymore, and this is how I did it, blah, blah, blah. I'm feeling a lot of energy this morning, and I was jumping on my trampoline, and I was listening to David Darrell's Freeloader song, a remix, and when I was bouncing, I was doing this glide conductor thing and feeling the energy, and then as the energy increased, I saw a vision of a person in my mind, and I sent that energy out to them with a gesture, like, whoo, send it to them. And I did that for several people, and that's definitely something a manic would do. This extra energy is meant to be shared. It's meant to be made relational and creational. It's not meant to be kept for the self. There is no self. This energy explodes the self, and then the energy's there. It's the negation of the self. So, yeah, lots more to talk about. I'll get to it later. I wanted to say that a little differently, that first part. I don't know what I wanted to say, but I'm not okay with sitting by and knowing there are ways out and not sharing that. And maybe that's within a peer role, but not really. Time to make a smoothie. It's a sign from the Blended Blender. 11:11. This morning I was feeling all celebratory, and then when I was driving to work, felt really first my credit card wouldn't work at the gas pump, and then it wouldn't work at the next gas station, so I used a different one. And then I was driving behind this really smelly pickup truck. I hate that smell when trucks stink, like pollution. And I was thinking, well, what is this all about? And pondering how maybe it was going to this peer support shift or something, but I think it's more PMS day. It's that one day where I feel super like, grr. So I'm gonna go with that and not do anything too drastic. And I may have to ban myself from reading tweets again because I read one last night and I read the link to it, and then I started writing this email to the person, and it ended up really long and sort of grr by the end. And I didn't send it, which was smart, but I'll probably read it to myself just to read it and show myself the amount of information and meaning creation that can happen from reading a small amount of information about what other people are doing. And it could be kind of distracting because I can create meaning and context and response all day long. And I'm supposed to be moving in what I'm creating. And there are two things that I am needing to write, yet I end up writing this big long thing regarding something else, and I haven't written those 2 things that I'm supposed to write for people. So, yeah. And this morning when I was bouncing on my trampoline and feeling all happy, I was tapping into my DJ possible self. I feel these possible selves and these possible trajectories. And then going to a shift in peer support, feeling like I really want to leave this behind. It feels like being silent. It feels like I can't speak up. And it's partly true because then I'm working and I can't talk to myself when I want if I feel like it. So it's again this movement of, I don't know what I'm talking about, but it just feels wrong to me today for sure. But perhaps today is the day of the month where anything would feel wrong. I feel like I want to make juice. I feel like, I don't know. So I work for a bit and then I might go to Valley Village and get a costume for the Boney M concert, or look for a costume just for fun because it's Halloween season, and it's not for Halloween but for some of the crazy, happy, magical backpack stuff. Sitting by the river with my sushi again. It's so good. This is why I need to continue fasting from tweets, because I read a tweet and I read the article to go with the tweet, and it's a short article, but for some reason I started writing an email to the researchers who are creating this study on bipolar disorder and creativity. And a bit on what it says. It's the CREST BD study, blah blah blah, whatever. It says people with bipolar disorder and their family members are more likely to be creative than the general public. Less is known as to why this may be. I'm going to say this fast. So they want to better understand the links between bipolar disorder and creativity. And they're saying motivation can help explain the higher levels of creativity often observed in people living with bipolar disorder. More specifically, we will focus on understanding people's responses to potential rewards. Our earlier work has suggested that people with bipolar disorder tend to display higher levels of investment in earning rewards in life, and this appears to be associated with higher levels of creative accomplishment. Note the words reward and accomplishment. We will use new tools from neurocognitive science to assess whether people with bipolar disorder are willing to work harder for potential rewards, and whether people with bipolar disorder tend to spend more time exploring novel options than sticking with familiar ones as they move towards a goal. Our group is excited to bring together experts with different perspectives to help better understand the links between creativity and bipolar disorder. For example, if it is seen that people with bipolar disorder may display a greater willingness to work harder for rewards, such behaviors could then be tracked to improve treatments and outcomes. The team hopes to share insights, blah, 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 and then it gives the contact. And the wording of this study bothered me indeed. And I was writing a little email, and it started off tame enough, but then I got into, I don't know what the flavor is, but I kind of want to read it now and put it out there and be done with it, because I don't want to read these studies and things and be compelled to write this sort of stuff. Tomorrow is a milestone day, so I want to read this before the milestone day because I want to get on with celebrating life. So I wrote, I was labeled with bipolar 6 years ago and have been deeply in touch with learning and exploring the energy of creativity experientially and by creating with it. Learning by creating is the most powerful way to learn. I would like to point out that the creative state is innately rewarding and fulfilling within itself. I don't feel there is an outside reward like Pavlov's dog. It's not a doing to get a reward, but the doing is creative, thus rewarding, as it's ever new. Creativity is something so new that the self doesn't even know what it's going to create. How then can it wish for a reward from which it doesn't even know will manifest? The reward is the selfless state, reward in quotes, which is seeing possibilities without the past interfering. Trendy circles call it flow, peak experience, etc. Yet if one comes out of it with some sense of self intact, one won't be labeled mentally ill for life. It is the seeing with fresh eyes, the exploration. It is a completely new algorithm in the brain, without reference to what we are programmed and conditioned to believe is rewarding through our education, family, media, etc. The brain is not wasting energy on reward and punishment, hence it has energy to create. If you have particular rewards in mind that you feel people with bipolar will work harder to get, you will find that. But it is much more vast than anything you could conjure up if you do not have that capacity yourself. The brain can work harder, in quotes, as it has more energy when it is not seeking rewards, but creating with a total unwasted energy. I've explored this deeply and found many hacks and viruses to the creativity algorithm. One of the worst viruses is being hypnotized into believing we are mentally ill. The trouble is, creativity has nothing to do with the self, yet we are diagnosed with a mental illness as a personal problem of a separate self, which is an epiphenomenon, an abstraction apart from the moment now. Living life as having a big problem with the self, which doesn't exist in the first place, and when it isn't in operation, creativity is one of the biggest blocks to creativity. It's all semantics. Children are the most creative when they are not yet saturated with all the program rewards and punishments that we force feed them disguised as love. As adults, being so full of reward and punishment ourselves, we can hardly imagine a state where that doesn't operate, and thus frame our science based on that, and thus put a tether on those minds that are making spontaneous attempts to break free. I assure you, it has nothing to do with reward. In reward implies the opposite, punishment. And what has punishment to do with creativity? Our brains are working harder at something indeed, but it won't be seen from the level of science. Quantum physics is getting close, but it's assuming that it's discovering something new, as if the universe hasn't always worked that way, and we couldn't calculate it. We create the way the world works with what we create. Look at what has been created as the way the world is for people who get labeled with mental illnesses. Look at what we are reduced to that spawns all your science. Our problems won't be solved by the same level of thought that created them. As Einstein said, science won't solve the problem of bipolar, as it has created the story of bipolar. Creativity, in its true sense, is the solution to our problems. No matter what you do, you won't be able to box it up and sell it back to us as treatment. Why have you forgotten your childlike creativity? So the wording in your study is incorrect. It's from an outside observer looking in and projecting the way its brain works onto the way the so-called bipolar brain is working, thus limiting it. Creativity is unlimited. Nothing to do with reward and punishment, yet it seems like it does because we are indeed punished for our new ways of operating. We are medicalized and marginalized. It's interesting how the mental health field is eons behind all the other sciences that say there is no self, no limits to the brain neuroplasticity, etc. Yet, we branded with mental illnesses or defective selves that need to be sold back our capacities after having them medicated away as our brains literally shrink and shrivel up. Look at what we are doing to the human brain and how the human brain is retaliating at all levels. Put away your microscope and zoom out to 30,000 feet. See through the eyes of a bird. Look at it and calculate in a single second its entire existence and interrelation and connection to everything else. We have that capacity. That is part of creativity, to understand the relatedness in flash. Put away your science and look with your own eyes and heart. See what is going on in the world, and maybe you'll have a clue as to what gets us to work harder. This emphasis on our supposed personal mental illness detracts us from the wholeness of life that we see, move with, and create based on. It gets us back into the algorithm that most of the world operates based on, to waste energy trying to solve the problems of the self, a self that is nowhere to be found. We'd like to tell you that there is no self, that we're all one consciousness and humanity, but you won't listen. If you would listen, we'd have many things to share with you. Stop studying us and have open dialogue with us, where we share and create new meaning together. In this way, we can share in the creativity, as it is not personal. It's impersonal. But if you meet me as if I'm a person with a personal problem, and you're a person that is going to help me solve them, you create me as I am. You create me as you perceive me, as you project your images onto me. The creative state is vulnerable, innocent. If you tell a child over and over that they are stupid, they will become stupid. Don't tell us we are mentally ill and you are going to help us in treatment with our creativity. We are creative non-selves. Look hard for yourself and you won't find it, not with your fanciest microscope. And if you look in this way, you may stumble on a creative way of looking. A looking, not knowing, as you can't find that thing that thinks it accumulates what it knows. The self is all your knowledge, and thus it is not creative. You can rearrange knowledge, but it is not creative. Did you ever think to ask us how it feels to be so creative without pathologizing us? Did you ever think to ask us what we feel this creativity is all about from our own perspective? Did you ever ask us what we want to create? Did you ever ask us what we would create as our life? You might find us to have an immense altruism and many other capacities and dimensions. What you call illness might be much richer than you think, if you could only see creatively. So of course I didn't send that, and after writing about half of it, I realized I wasn't going to send it. And I also realized that looking at these tweets and things creates a lot of context and content that wells up and arises in me. And I don't know how much I want to look at that anymore, and I keep saying that to myself. And when I was driving today, I was thinking, maybe I'll set a new possible date for moving on from this mental health stuff. I'm doing a little bit more work in mental health, and I want to go to that cognitive remediation conference to see what they're saying about us and our brain shrinkage due to mental illness, which is a load of crap. And then I want to go to that CBT and psychosis workshop that seems really good, and I can only go to one day of it because I start my self-employment class. So the first and only day I can go to that second workshop, November 6th, maybe that can be my new potential goal for not focusing on this stuff at all. And not that I won't bring it up at all, but maybe I'll get rid of everything on any of my Twitter things that I barely use anyway that relate to mental illness. And sometimes I click on what Natasha Tracy writes about bipolar, and I find it really sad. I think it paints a really bleak and grim picture. And she herself says we shouldn't compare whose bipolar is better or worse. So I don't want to say mine's better and hers is worse, but whatever, it's just really sad. I feel bad that she's suffering that much and wants to write about it and give that impression that it's like that for everyone, because it's not. And it can be that bad for sure, but it's not that bad for everyone. So, yeah. So yeah, maybe November 6th, I will not talk so much about it. And that's when I'm starting that self-employment class, and I want it to be about magic and fun. And today I went to Value Village and I bought some fun stuff. Maybe I'll share some of it tomorrow because it's a bit of a milestone day and it's late and I am needing to write 2 things for 2 different people that I said I would, and then I look at a tweet and I spend an hour writing that. So that's my point, is I could look at some things that will create a download, an expansion in context and a creative movement towards those elements that I want to create. And part of it is the self-employment thing and thinking about that. That's creating something that I want to move into, and it's challenging. Whereas looking at a little bit that someone writes, because of the whole gravity and momentum of the last 6 years, it's easy for me to look at that and make a big calculation based on all that I've seen and experienced through personal experience in the mental health system, what I've seen in others, being able to transcend, so knowing all that stuff isn't true 100%, it creates this big blah. And I don't know if that's valuable, and maybe it's kind of harsh what I wrote, but at the same time, I don't need to be sold my creativity back as a treatment modality to improve the outcome of my life. So why does anyone else need that? Why can't we step out of it all? Why can't we transcend? Why can't we put these scientists who are trying to probe us out of business?